Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the SASB standards, that's the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, specifically looking at drug retailers. We're going to explore exactly how those massive 24/7 pharmacies measure their hidden impacts. I mean, when you think of a pharmacy, you probably just think of picking up a prescription or grabbing some toothpaste, right? But behind the scenes, these businesses are navigating some incredibly complex sustainability and operational challenges. So we're going to see exactly how they measure and report on these challenges using industry standards. So let's dive right into this pretty provocative question. Think about it for a second. Chain drug retailers operate thousands of locations. They're running lighting and refrigeration around the clock nonstop. And at the exact same time, they're acting as these massive digital vaults for highly sensitive, protected health information. We're going to look at how these companies are quite literally required to track both their massive physical energy use and their highly sensitive data security threats. To do that, we're going to tackle 5 main areas today: tracking the energy footprint, grid versus renewable energy, securing sensitive customer data, quantifying data breach impacts, and finally, the cost of legal losses. Now, what's really fascinating here is how the standard gives us this super clear quantitative roadmap. It places energy management right side by side with data security and privacy. It lays out the exact accounting metrics, like the total energy consumed and the total number of data breaches that these entities have to report. This gives investors a crystal clear picture of their operational risks.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, tracking the energy footprint, the lifeblood of the 24/7 pharmacy.
The standard requires companies to quantitatively track their energy footprint, calculating total energy consumed in gigajoules. Now, a gigajoule is a massive unit of measurement, but hey, it's absolutely necessary when you're tracking thousands of giant stores. And the standard is incredibly strict here. This aggregate figure has to include energy from all sources. That means power purchased from the grid, as well as any energy produced by the company itself. To be perfectly precise, this captures literally everything keeping those insulin fridges humming and the aisles bright. The scope zeroes in on energy directly consumed by the entity during the reporting period. So we're talking direct fuel usage, purchased electricity, heating, cooling, and steam energy. It is a completely comprehensive snapshot of their physical footprint.
Moving right along to Section 2, grid versus renewable energy. Where exactly does the power come from? Because knowing how much power is used is really only half the battle. The standard demands we look at the exact percentage of grid electricity and renewable energy utilized. It's a strict mathematical split. You divide the purchased grid electricity by the total energy consumption to get the grid percentage. And you do the exact same thing for renewables. It essentially forces total transparency about whether a retailer is relying on fossil fuel-heavy grids or cleaner alternatives. But listen, you can't just slap a solar panel on the roof and call it a day. The SASB standard defines renewable energy very strictly as energy from sources replenished faster than they're depleted. That includes geothermal, wind, solar, hydro, and certified biomass. And here's the kicker. To actually claim this renewable energy, companies must retain their renewable energy certificates, or RECs. They absolutely cannot sell those certificates off to someone else and still claim the green credit for themselves. Okay, let's pivot. We're moving from the physical footprint, all those gigajoules, over to the equally critical digital footprint, data security and breaches. Because a modern pharmacy isn't just a brick-and-mortar building, right? It's a massive, highly sensitive database of human lives. Which brings us to Section 3, securing sensitive customer data, protecting the digital database. Drug retailers manage staggering amounts of information. The SASB standard draws a really strict line in the sand here, separating personal data from personal health data. Personal data is anything that identifies a living individual, but personal health data? That's a highly specialized subset, revealing someone's physical or mental health status or the specific healthcare services they've received. Think about it. Elite's credit card is terrible, sure, but Elite's prescription history? That is a fundamentally different, much more damaging level of privacy invasion.
And that leads us to Section 4, quantifying data breach impacts, specifically metric HCDR 230A.2.
When an unauthorized breach happens, a company can't just issue a vague PR apology. They are required to quantitatively track the exact number of data breaches. Then, they have to categorize them by a percentage split, showing personal data versus personal health data. And finally, they must count the number of unique customers affected in each of those specific categories. It's a very exact, multi-step calculation.
Visualizing the split is super helpful for investors and analysts to see exactly what kind of exposure happened. Oh, and there's a really strict rule here too. If the company can't verify that different accounts belong to the same unique customer, those accounts actually have to be disclosed separately. Accuracy is totally paramount.
Now, here's a kind of surprising caveat built into the standard. Not every single digital hiccup counts. The metric actually excludes incidents if the company can reasonably prove there's no real risk of damage to the business, and no risk of economic or social disadvantage to the individuals. So, those tiny, harmless glitches, they actually get filtered out of this specific metric.
Finally, we hit Section 5, the cost of legal losses, under metric HCDR230A3.
If a retailer fails to protect all that sensitive customer data, this is where we see the bottom line financial consequence. The standard requires companies to calculate total monetary losses from associated legal proceedings related to data security. This has to be reported as a hard, quantitative figure in their standard presentation currency. And these losses cover the whole shebang: civil judgments and settlements, regulatory penalties, and even criminal judgments and restitution. But, and this is a pretty interesting detail, it explicitly excludes legal defense fees. So we are looking purely at the penalties and the actual settlements paid out, not what they paid their lawyers.
And, the accountability doesn't just stop at writing a massive check. The standard mandates that the company must describe the context. Like, was this a highly sophisticated hack or just a careless employee error? Plus, they have to detail their specific corrective actions. They have to explain exactly how they are changing their operations, management, or tech to make sure it absolutely never happens again.
So, wrapping up this explainer, I want to leave you with something to chew on. The next time you walk into a big retail pharmacy, look at the lights shining above you, listen to the hum of the refrigerators, and look at the computer screen at the counter. Now that you know the rigorous, standardized data tracking, the gigajoules of energy they consume, and the firewalls protecting your personal health data, how does that change the way you view and ultimately trust your local drug retailer? Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.